Hello, you're on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Samput. Welcome to this new edition of your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Let's meet Melchy Obiang. He's one of the most accomplished African directors. After discovering cinema, which he sees as mass education, this Gabonese filmmaker has had a career as a cultural advisor to the government and has created his own production company, Mopanas. His movie, The Heart of Women, was recently awarded in Paris. He's our guest this week.
And in fact, it's hard to understand why a film that's now more than 80 years old, why it should win such an important prize today. It's proof that the problem still exists.
No to rape in Nigeria. An association decides to fight against the scourge by supporting victims with psychological and legal support in Abuja and Lagos.
A group of young people, myself inclusive, we decided to create something different, something that can work for us young people, that can, be there for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence.
From Mauritania to Senegal, we travel with pastoral families on the front lines of climate change and growing insecurity. In Nigeria, rape continues to ravage the lives of thousands of women. As many as 11,200 cases were reported last year, and several young girls have even died. This daily tragedy was examined in a recent report by Amnesty International, which documents victims deprived of justice and rapists who escape prosecution. Hundreds of cases go unreported due to the stigma and blame on the victims. To break this vicious cycle, a Nigerian association, Stand Up Against Rape, is helping victims stand up and defend themselves. Our correspondent, Hugo Yuana, has the story.
I was in school one day and I was making my way to the supermarket, just very close to my hostel, and I was grabbed by some group of men, and that was when it happened. I was sexually assaulted, and all I could do was just scream and call out for help. And luckily for me, some of the community members came to my rescue, but the deed had been done already.
Christy survived a sexual assault in 2021. One friend told her about Stand to End Rape Initiative, a local right group based in Nigeria with offices in Lagos and Abuja that was created in 2014 to support rape survivors.
It stemmed from a lack of visible holistic support for survivors. So a group of young people, myself inclusive, we decided to create something different, something that can work for us young people, that can, be there for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence.
From forced and early marriages to the physical, mental, or sexual assault on a woman, nearly 3 in 10 Nigerian women have experienced physical violence by age 15, according to the UNFPA Nigeria. But survivors often face challenges in financing litigation against culprits, while family members and survivors often withdraw cases after reporting to law enforcement agencies. The main reason is that requirement for clinical evidence of sexual and gender-based violence before prosecution has always been a burden on the survivor, and the accusatorial system of prosecution in Nigeria, which required concrete evidences, poses a challenge in prosecuting cases. This is why Stand to End Rape Initiative is leading the advocacy to protect the rights of the vulnerable persons who have been exploited unjustly. They have so far supported over 720 survivors.
We work with NAPTIP, which is a national agency for the prohibition of trafficking in persons. It's the organization mandated by the VAP law, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, to house issues of sexual violence on the national level. So with support from the EU and British Council and other organizations like STAIR, we were able to establish the first national sex offenders register in Nigeria. And, we've been supporting with updating that register with, cases so that we have a holistic hub where you can get data on around issues of sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria. We also work with the Nigerian Police Force because they're important, Ministry of Justice, Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, or Women Affairs and Social Development, depending on the level, either federal or at the state level. We also work with the Ministry of Health because we've been doing a lot of work around training primary healthcare providers to provide emergency medical support to survivors at the grassroots, because we've realized that because of proximity, some survivors are unable to visit the closest hospital or a sexual assault referral center.
Some of the survivors declined speaking on camera for personal reasons, and Christy is the only one who offered to give her account, but anonymously. She is now trying to recover from the assault thanks to the legal counsel and also therapy sessions provided by the Stand to End Rape initiative.
Currently, the perpetrator has been apprehended and the case is in court right now. STAY really helped me with all the therapy sessions they were giving me. I was able to receive legal support as well, legal counsel. The lawyers were always following up with me, making sure I was okay. Also, the therapist was also following up with me regularly to make sure that I was okay.
Nigerian women are becoming increasingly impatient with gender violence and what they perceive as lack of public action. In 2020, a public outcry after the rape and murder of a student led to an online petition and the hashtag #IamTiredToo that spread in the country. Police inaction and a slow justice process are often pointed out by victims of rape. In this context, the activities of Stand to End Rape initiative show a step in the right direction in bringing lasting solutions to these threats against Nigerian women.
We follow on the same theme of the shortcomings of our societies through the sharp eyes of our guest today. Gabonese director Melchy Obiang saw his film, The Heart of Women, awarded the Special Grand Jury Prize at the International African Film Festival in Paris. He confided in Laurence Soustras and Thierry Schiller on this great cinematographic fresco of a family tragedy and what it denounces, a yawning legal vacuum for the protection of African women. Melchy Obiang, hello and congratulations. Your film, The Heart of Women, has just won the Special Grand Jury Prize at the International African Film Festival in Paris. What was your reaction?
Alors je l'ai accueilli avec
I was proud because it was like a reward for all the hard work.
Ça a résonné comme la récompense d'un travail acharné.
It represents for me that me and my team, who have been with me for several years, almost 20 years in fact,
quand même près de 20 ans aujourd'hui, que nous avançons.
It's a recognition that we are advancing little by little with the Montparnasse studios, that we are on the right track. We must redouble our efforts to go even further. So it was a moment of satisfaction, of joy, and a challenge for the future, for even greater success.
Pour des victoires plus grandes.
The Heart of Women was released 9 years ago. It's an emotional film in which a well-to-do modern couple in love are torn apart by family jealousies. Why did you choose this theme?
J'ai choisi ce thème parce que c'est un thème.
I chose this theme as it's something that unfortunately is still relevant. I say unfortunately because it shouldn't be.
Et effectivement.
And in fact, it's hard to understand why a film that's now more than 80 years old, why it should win such an important prize today. It's proof that the problem still exists.
Que la problématique demeure. Ça a été pour moi une façon de tirer la sonnette.
For me, it was a way to set the alarm bells ringing, because cinema must be a means of raising the public's awareness, and that of the authorities and legal bodies, to say a red line is being crossed. We cannot let such a practice exist within a modern society. For countries that want to be free, this is also part of freedom. A woman must be looked after and shielded by the law, which protects her and her children when the husband disappears. However, unfortunately in Africa, in Gabon and elsewhere, as soon as the husband is called up to God, then his family might, after a while, begin harassing the widow in the most terrible way to take away what she was able to build with her late husband. She finds herself in the street. It is unfair, both socially and economically, and against God's plan. So for me, this theme was necessary.
But in your film, there are female victims. There are also the female executioners. It's a real bunch of furies, isn't it?
Oui. Effectivement.
Yes, indeed. And I wanted to show that this disaster, because for me it is a disaster, this misfortune, is also partly kept up by the women themselves. Because when a woman lines up against another to impose such violence, she spreads this evil, forgetting that tomorrow she herself or her daughter or another woman might also become a victim. Whereas they should be the first to denounce it, to fight it. So for me it was a question of showing that the unhappiness of the woman is also in some ways self-imposed. Because while some suffer from it, die from it, or remain impacted for life, others are smart and maintain good relations within the family. A process which is now from a different era.
Would you make the same movie today, 9 years later?
I would give it the same title, but the content would be different, because we should acknowledge that many things have, nevertheless, fortunately changed, especially in Gabon, where we have the honor of having Mrs. Sylvia Bongo Ondimba, a very active First Lady, in this fight, to whom the prize, quite rightly, has been dedicated. Her contribution is such that today in Gabon, some very important legal provisions have been taken at a national level, and that has significantly reduced this practice. And so if I had to make the film again, it would have the same title, but it wouldn't be the same, because we must accept, as well as denounce, but we also accept that things have changed a lot in a good way, fortunately.
Let's talk about your latest work, The Silence of Women, which is about a woman forced into marriage.
Oui. En effet.
Yes, here too I dealt with a subject which for many women, especially when young, they see their futures being taken away from them. It's the story of a young girl who is brilliant and has just graduated from high school and has dreams.
And
like all of us, has ambitions for her future. But she will be forced into a marriage with an older and violent man. Very violent. So she's going to have to quit school. She will become a victim and be physically abused, enduring in silence, even though her family and those close to her are aware of what is happening. A common enough experience, and one many are afraid to condemn, often because of fear of reprisals, of what families will say. We say to ourselves, no, I'm here. It's in the interests of my family, so I must put up with everything. No and no. Each woman, each young woman has the freedom to choose her own destiny, her own path. It's a new film released last June, which strongly deplores violence against women, physical violence, verbal violence, and all with the complicity of relatives.
What reception did your film have in Gabon, and what would you say to those who oppose this sort of tradition?
Le film a été bien accueilli.
The film was well received. It was favorably reviewed. It was well received. But there are, I want to say, the conservatives, the custodians of a certain tradition, who believe this fight that I am leading cannot be explained away as traditional or cultural. You cannot force a human being into doing anything, whether it's in the name of culture or tradition. Tradition and culture should be like the law and should guarantee the well-being of the greatest number. And for the greatest number, there is the basic freedom of the individual.
Mais lorsqu'au nom de la liberté, au nom de la
But when, in the name of freedom, in the name of culture or of belief, we must kill, in quotation marks, this is not culture. It is no longer tradition.
Ce n'est plus de la culture, ce n'est plus de la tradition. Non. Et moi, je ne m'arrêterai pas parce que...
No, I won't stop because I know I'm fighting the good fight. And thank God there are now more filmmakers and organizations that are overthrowing the practices that lock people up or that privatize freedom. Because we must not let it take hold now or ever.
Nous ne devons pas laisser ça plus longtemps s'imposer à nous.
Welcome to the second part of Initiative Africa. Let me now take you on an extraordinary journey, the daily transhumance of pastoral families in the Sahel who travel from Mauritania to Senegal with their animals. 20 million people live off herding in this vast region, and for the majority of them, the depletion of natural resources, water and pastures, leads to conflict and insecurity. But since 2015, herders and villagers have gradually learned to dialogue through local committees. And the regional project to support pastoralism in the Sahel, financed by the World Bank, has made it possible to vaccinate millions of animals and build or rehabilitate 181 water points. Take a look.
Tan me golle babam golle jatam ko gayna e fo ko gayna ka dal
takim ek ko dum tawmi tanam hena wat babi bam hena mbat se hodo gasi tan min e gan min jele hot odo jaman hena wadi hen de min gonata min jahata tan balli didi min jotto hena wadi hen de min badata hedde balli sam walla balɗe sappo joyi walla balɗe nogas ene hen waɗi min keɓe hen caɗe ɓurnomi hen wurto mi ayne yahna kaake ɗe moƴƴe siko ɗe moƴƴi mi wawa hen wuur ko ɗum wurtim hen
mbeɗa wona ko mbawi sifde minen noon min keytata min egga min dentino dammiɗo amen fof ha kawra min cuuro eyo min gadda daabeji amen min do bagage amen min jaltin min tega dow saret so won paari min kaɓɓa ha teeɗo min kaɓɓa bonɗe amen eyi kaake ɗe deppare jawta jaada gaynaka eyi sarteje ɗen kaɓɓa gabbo
ala hoɗo ko wawata nani hoɗo hewatno min gona ɗo ha toɓ joni noon oɗo jamanu kam hoɗo ustot tan min jaa
komin taw yetton ko fode min dañde mumen caɗele probléme ndiyam ga ayi guese mumen minen hen dañi kadi probléme
mi indi kam haɗa indi fulɓe kam aɓe ɗo keewa siko wurno enen to ɓen matiɗo ɗo wuɗɗi kam hoɗo koko ɗo heddi ndiyam ɗam de kam haɗam yeewe probléme sabro bi on somin jeeyi han min taw homo waɗi han min taw mboɗo han min jollo janggati min gonɗo goto hen to dañ barili min gar hoɗo ko noon inoɗi hoɗo seeɗa tan inoɗi hoɗo kam o ñamde nde kam min neɗɗo mankat ñamde tan yeeya mbawdu mum sooda gooro mum ko noon tan min gonira hen gooro amen min jooga hen ndiyam amen heddi ko won gooro woro amen min cooda hen maaro min cooda hen nebbam min cooda hen dal wadde ko maaro gueɗe cewɗe ɗe min dañi min cooda hen gawri amen ɗum woni gooro ɗum min codda gawri si
jafe-jafe yi may jànkuwante ak ñoom damay xëy fii di béy ba wàcc nit jóge fu Saalum ñëw fanaanal ci pegg tool bi xëy na sax gisul tool bi mais day jur gi dañuy wëtti guddi rek du ko yëg mën naa am fekk yëg ko mën naa am fekk yëg na ko waaye man fekk man béy naa ba ñibbi jur gi wëtti guddi ñëw fekk ñu dugg tool bi yàq lu bëri ma ñëw rek fekk ñu yàq sama ko toppee du ma ci man moom dara day ñàkk waaw damay ñàkk li mu waroon a am rendement bi day wàññiku.
Le but de cette réunion, c'est d'engager un dialogue entre agriculteurs et éleveurs pour se comprendre, pour minimiser les conflits. On discute et on trouve des compromis. Avant la création de ce cadre, il y avait beaucoup de conflits qui ont même amené à des morts d'hommes, qui ont amené même à des empoisonnements d'animaux. Mais depuis la création du cadre, avec les concertations, avec les réunions que nous organisons au niveau des communes, au niveau des départements, il y a eu vraiment moins de conflits.
Let's now get back to our guest this week, Melchy Obiang, for the rest of his interview. He talks to us about the sources of his creativity, but also about his business plan to ensure an economic balance for his passion for cinema. Let's listen to him. Melchy Obiang, what actually drew you to cinema?
Je suis arrivé au cinéma.
I was attracted to cinema out of pure passion. My own story is quite special because cinema wasn't the first thing I studied. In fact, I didn't study it at all to begin with. I began with medical studies, influenced by my late parents, especially my late mother, who wanted me to follow in her footsteps because she worked in the medical field.
À un certain moment, la passion du cinéma, l'appel.
But at a certain point, the passion for cinema, the need for cinema was so strong in me that I could not do anything else.
J'ai dû apprendre d'abord dans le tas.
At first, I had to learn on the job, as they say, from Mr. André Auton, the famous Gabonese filmmaker who passed away several years ago. May he rest in peace. He was my first teacher. He took me under his wing and trained me as much as he could. When I left, I took off. I began working at the television networks where I learned all about video, framing, reporting, and then bigger productions. And I produced my first work, the Kongasa series, which was an enormous success and helped establish my reputation. It all really started from there. With the success of Kongosa, I created the Montparnasse Studios, and it all led to where I am today.
Voilà ce que ça a donné.
Women's rights are a common theme in your work. Is this based on personal experience?
Oui, oui, je pense que oui. Ça, c'est un peu ce que
oh yes, I think so. It resembles what I experienced with my late mother in my childhood because I grew up in a polygamous family.
Dans une famille polygame. Je suis quelqu'un d'assez ouvert de nature.
I am an open person by nature. I don't judge. Whoever chooses to be polygamous has their reasons. But the problem arises when our choices hurt others. Currently, there is a problem, and I saw it brought heartbreak to the family, hypocrisy, embezzlement of all kinds, dislocation.
De tout ordre, dislocation. Et puis de là, je suis sorti.
And then I got out of there. And from the age of 11 up to my 20s, can you imagine, I did not know, I had no idea about my brothers and sisters from other mothers.
Ça veut dire que je pouvais, quelque part,
it meant that I might sometime in my 20s or 30s have married or known one of my own sisters without realizing it. And why? Because their marriage had effectively fallen apart. There had been heartbreak. And that's when I understood there were several things that women went through in silence, and that I had to talk about it, because all these women that were there had things to say, but none could say anything. Why, out of tradition, is it customary it's only the man who can speak? You can't, in the sense it's not possible. So I had to speak out about it through themes, through cinema, through my films. So that's why, really.
Donc, c'est un peu ça.
Now then, money. We know the financing of cinema in Africa, as elsewhere, is not necessarily very easy. Can you call on private companies to finance your films? How's that going?
Alors, effectivement,
True, it's not always easy to get funding for a film. In our Montparnasse studios, our style is to work on a modest project.
Dans les studios Montparnasse, nous avons cette particularité d'être organisés autour d'un petit plan de développement. Et donc,
with a development plan, and therefore we do a lot of marketing, we do a lot of sales.
Beaucoup de commercial. Et je pense que le profil des réalisateurs.
And I think directors today, in principle, ought to include this because it's your project that you hope to sell to a partner who has the funds, has the money.
Un partenaire qui lui a des sous, et il faut pouvoir lui montrer.
You must be able to show them, to justify why they should invest in your movie.
Dans votre film. Nous travaillons beaucoup.
Most companies we often work with get visibility in return. It can be for a product placement, or brand placement, and so on. But we make sure this doesn't change the nature of the film or in any way corrupts its message. Absolutely not. So that's our development approach. And so far, it's okay, it works.
Et jusque-là, ça va, ça marche.
Your Montparnasse Productions company recently launched an entertainment app, Montparnasse TV. How does it work and what sort of audience does it have?
Alors, oui, l'application Montparnasse TV est une application que nous avons lancée.
Yes, the Montparnasse TV application is an app we launched to reach a greater number of people, and we've reached the diaspora, and a truly diverse audience all the same, adults and young people. In the past, we had a problem with those who were abroad and who wanted to access our films. Some of our films are on internet platforms, others are not, as it doesn't always suit us. So we thought it was better to set up a platform that would allow them to have permanent access, wherever they are, to our productions for a token price.
En payant quelque chose de symbolique.
This is what we have put in place. It works well. We're pleased we took the decision to invest in the application because it brought us closer to many of our fans who had no contact with and who did not have the possibility to watch our films in real time.
Et qui n'avaient pas la possibilité de regarder nos œuvres en temps réel.
Let's talk about young people. Do you think there's a new generation of young filmmakers, or young aspiring African filmmakers? In other words, an audience that watches films through these applications. What have you seen in this respect?
Oui, il y a une nouvelle génération de cinéastes qui est.
Yes, there has been a new generation of filmmakers coming through the ranks. It's a spontaneous generation, almost impetuous. Very high-tech, but the consequence is that basic training and learning is increasingly taking a back seat, since the formats are increasingly automated. We have a phone, we have plenty of applications to improve the image, to boost the sound, so on and so forth. Whereas we had to learn to do this manually, right?
There are now many film schools opening in Africa. Would you in turn like to be a teacher for the new generation?
Oui. Avec beaucoup de plaisir. Avec beaucoup de plaisir.
Yes, it would be a pleasure. It would be a pleasure to give back, to share what I received when I get the chance to do so.
Je le rends, que je le partage lorsque j'en ai l'occasion. Et moi, je pense que ça devrait être.
I think it makes absolute sense because it's a chain that should not be broken. It's so wonderful to have had the instruction, to have learnt the skills, to use them, and then, when necessary, to pass them on. It's very valuable. This is really important.
C'est très important parce que beaucoup de pays
because many African countries have seen a break in film production because some elders, when the time came, did not want to share their experience. There were young people who were interested, but they didn't want to hand their experience over. And that is not good. You must pass it on when the time comes, so that the chain isn't broken.
Melchy Obiang, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Initiative Africa is over for today. You can, of course, find Melchy Obiang's interview and the replay of our programs on our news website, africaonair.com. And of course, you can also find us on all our social media channels. Feel free to share, like, and comment with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, I'll see you again with a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week, everyone, and goodbye.